Thanks, Chief. Good afternoon and welcome everybody, or good morning if you're on the West Coast. Welcome to the monthly IAFC Technology Council webinar series. Again, we want to welcome all of our other participants today from the wildland side of the house we've invited. We think this is a very informal presentation today that you're going to get something out of, just like the Technology Council is. Next slide, please, Charlie. So the ISC is an all-risk, all-hazards response leaders organization. The ISC represents the leadership of fire and emergency responders worldwide. Our members are the world's leading experts in firefighting, EMS, terrorism response, hazmat, natural disaster, search and rescue, wildland mitigation response, and public safety policy. Next. The ISC's Technology Council serves as a knowledge center for technology developments that affect the fire service. The Council provides a forum of information and knowledge exchange among different stakeholders, including chiefs, public safety organizations, as well as vendors. Our vision is to advance fire, rescue, EMS, and allied agencies to the leading edge of technological adaptation. Our chair, Chief Dan Muncie, San Bernardino County Fire Department, and our vice chair, Tim Burke, Spring Fire Department of Texas. I want to welcome you today to this presentation from Zonehaven, and we will hope that you enjoy it, and we will take questions at the end of the session, but you can type questions into your chat area. Next. The Technology Council hosts these monthly webinars and demos of new and exciting technology that the fire and emergency services might or might not know of. The webinars allow the members of the Technology Council to ask questions and provide valuable feedback to our vendors. Please make sure that your microphones are on mute unless you're asking a question at the end of the presentation. Please hold the questions till the end of the presentation, and you may use the chat box to ask questions during the presentation or notify the moderator of any issues. At this time, I want to turn it over to Charlie and Steve. And thank you for hosting us today, and it's all yours.
Great. Chief Muncie, did you want to do any introduction?
No, sir. I thank you for the opportunity. I'm just going to say that this presentation I'm looking forward to, obviously working for San Bernardino County, a Southern California fire department with a large local response area in the wildland urban interface. Evacuation management continues to be a problem. So when Zonehaven was brought to us by our partner from Interra to discuss evacuations and how to make them faster and safer in conjunction with working with the community through pre-planning, training drills, and alerting the community outreach, this certainly got our attention. So Charlie, you are the CEO and co-founder of Zonehaven, and you're joined today by Deputy Chief Matt Sampson from the South San Francisco Fire Department. We're certainly happy to have you here and looking forward to the presentation.
Great. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you again to Interra for making the introduction. So today we will spend a little bit of time on the general wildfire problem that has really driven the development of the Zonehaven platform. So it's a bit of an origin story for why we are where we are today. One of the biggest learnings from all of this is that the evacuation challenges are not unique to wildfire alone. And so the same tools can be adapted to other hazards as well. Matt Sampson, Chief Sampson, will walk through the wildfire problem and evacuation challenges, and then we'll show you how we were battle tested in the CZU Lightning Complex fire, walk through some of the details of that, and then discuss kind of the regional approach to thinking about evacuations. And within that, you'll have an opportunity to see the application. We'll open it up and demonstrate it so that you can actually see the interface and how it works. And at the end, it would be great to be able to answer any questions that you have. So once again, Chief Sampson is from South San Francisco Fire Department, and he is one of the first folks that took the bet on Zonehaven with Chief Cox. And so we're really happy to have him here today. And I'm Charlie Crocker. I've been in the public sector space for at least 25 years, doing everything from environmental consulting to GIS databases. We had a GIS consulting firm for many years. I worked at Autodesk for over a decade, doing both GIS activities and building out big data systems. And so Zonehaven is really the culmination of all of those things coming together. And so we're really excited to be able to share that with you today. So I'm going to pass it to Chief Sampson, and welcome.
Hello, and good morning / afternoon to the group. Chief Muncie, Chief Burke, thanks for allowing me to share our story, and then Charlie for the invitation to come and share our story too from the South San Francisco, San Mateo County side of things. I'm always excited to talk about it and share as much as we can. Like Charlie stated, go over the current fire problem we're facing in California, and this is not new information to everybody, but I think it helps understand where the concept or where we thought the evacuation solution was really going to come from. And in 2018, as you guys have all seen the satellite photos from Paradise, we had a big problem. And it was the culmination of a few things. And the first one being water fire suppression, meaning for the past 100 years, how we've been aggressively fighting forest fires and really trying to suppress them and not allowing them to burn. Added in with a decrease in prescription burning. And then all of that culminating in forest health because the forests aren't being not being managed properly. So we start seeing a lot of dead fuel loading. Additionally, the humans, populations are moving into interface either by choice or not by choice, depending on housing availability or lifestyle changes. And the reflex from that, or the result of that, is homes become fuel in the interface, as well as the infrastructure is not there to support getting folks out of harm's way. Combine that with the changes in climate we're seeing, we have a recipe to have this happen over and over again throughout the West, but specifically in California. And it's only a matter of time until we see the same type of event, same velocity of fire that we saw here reoccur again. So from the pictures from the last slide, whenever you can see flames from a satellite photo, it's a pretty good indicator that we can't suppress this fire with the capabilities we have now. Boots on the ground, aircraft is not going to stop that type of fire. What we really are left with then is an evacuation event, not a firefighting event in the initial attack. So first 12 to 24 hours, we just have to do our best to get folks out of harm's way because we can't stop what's going on the fire front. So to do that, because these fires are moving faster and they're burning hotter and they're burning quicker, we have to start the evacuation process a lot earlier. We learned from Paradise and all the after action reviews. We learned from 2017 in Sonoma County for the Tubbs and Nuns fire. We saw again in 2019 with the Fade, and then this past year in California over and over again that we need to initiate evacuations early, and we have to do them over a larger slot of land so that we can get the most people out of the way because these take time. And time is not on our side. So we have to do the best we can to trade time for planning. And that's where we're going to now. But the other part of the evacuation piece is that the mindset for the public has changed, which is a good thing in our favor. So now that the public has really opened their eyes to these big events that could really cause harm and damage to their neighborhood, they're really looking for an evacuation order, or at least information earlier and faster. And so that is the silver lining in this, that if we can get the word out in a way they can understand it and be a consistent message, then we're going to be in much better shape in terms of the public actually receiving the message. And whenever we need to do a larger evacuation or a bigger one or a faster one, it's going to take the same multi-agency coordination that we've seen put out fires for years and years and years in the state of California. Our mutual aid system really thrives on the ability to bring everybody together and start playing from the same sheet of music. But how do we get them on the same sheet of music for the evacuation piece when we really have to? Because to execute a large-scale evacuation in a timely manner doesn't take just the fire department or just law or just OES or just part of the private sector. It really takes everybody coming together and acting as one group. Another big factor that we considered when we were talking about San Mateo County, where we were looking to solve what would be an evacuation problem or come up with something a little bit more effective that we could use, is the traffic network. And as you guys know, the traffic infrastructure has not been enhanced based on population increases in an area. It wasn't designed for the traffic we see nowadays with so many people on the road, and it certainly was not engineered to support large-scale evacuations. So how do we take the existing infrastructure now and leverage all the technology we have or we can to really make the process I guess more efficient is a safe way to put it, but we need to be able to use whatever tools we can to make our roads more effective for getting people out of harm's way. And that's where we really try to leverage the technology. And again, the part of the pre-incident planning or the actual evacuation planning is considering all aspects of what we need to do and our responsibilities. And one of the biggest ones is identifying vulnerable populations early on in the process, way prior to the event or left of the bang, so that we can already have a plan in place to get those folks out that works hand in hand with the rest of the evacuation process that's going on, and not have one portion or component of it weigh any other part down, making it ineffective. I touched on just a second ago with these fires being not suppression efforts in the beginning, but really mass casualty incidents or mass rescue incidents. It's really a double-edged sword, because now we're taking fire suppression resources away from actually suppressing fires and using them to coordinate rescues and get people out of harm's way, which kicks the can on the fire suppression response down the road and ends up being a bigger problem than we had to deal with. If we could get folks out of harm's way quicker and faster, we wouldn't have to dedicate so many suppression resources to doing that, and hopefully make a bigger impact actually on the firefight, so that we have less of a problem down the road. Quick updated sheet from the fires in California last year. This is really to reinforce the fact that these events aren't going anywhere, and we don't change the way or improve the way we're doing it. We're going to continue to get somewhere the same results. And this is the big list of fires in California, top 20, and the ones with the fire symbol on the left were actually from 2020, and being the most destructive wildfires in California. We had the largest complex fire last year in the state's history. We had the single largest fire in the state's history at the Creek Fire last year. So these events continue to occur, and gives us plenty of reason to move forward with the evacuation piece. So that brought us to where we're at now to some extent. And in 2018, we had the Kincaid fire, which was right on the, Camp Fire and Car Fire, which were right on the heels of the 2017 events. Those 2 years in a row really woke up the public, which put a lot of pressure on the electeds to find out, hey, what is our community doing in terms of evacuations? What is our new plan, or what have we learned, or how can we improve what we're doing so we don't end up in the same predicament as those other communities did? Can we learn from their mistakes? So with that directive, the CAL FIRE unit here in San Mateo County, and then South San Francisco as the co-leads on this problem, started looking into ways we could do something a little bit different, maybe improve what we're doing and start bringing a lot of the same technologies we live with on a daily basis to do all sorts of other things in life. How can we bring that to the evacuation management sector? So taking that 2018 as a starting point, and then actually moving, the picture you see on the right is from 2019. That's the Kincaid incident in terms of evacuation planning. But most of the planning that's done in terms of evacuations is really done on the fly. There's still up to recently a lot of Sharpies on hoods of cars, and field commanders really being tasked with extremely difficult decisions in the heat of the battle. And those folks can really do that very well. And the fire suppression or fire service in California has had years and years and years of experience of managing these big incidents. We have some folks that are doing some incredible stuff. But the question was, can we give them some tools, or can we do something to help them do their job better? And that really was kind of a starting point from where we were at. The reason the Kincaid photo is up here is it really showed the value. I think it really highlights the value of where we're at now. You see the big tent, you see a lot of folks that are really experienced in evacuation management doing their job quite well. The difference with the Kincaid fire is that there was a 40-hour pre-planned period from when fire was anticipated to hit based on weather. And so with that 40 hours, everyone got together and put together a great evacuation plan. Started early, started moving folks, and there were some hiccups like everything, but for the most part, it moved relatively well. Now, that also is very similar to what we see on the East Coast, and I say we, but looking at it from the West Coast view of hurricanes coming in, and usually time is given before a hurricane is hit, so folks can get warnings out, people can make some preparations, and then the folks that looks like they're doing harm's way can move if they need to. So the same type of event happens in 2019 here, we were given time. Unfortunately, most of these events, we weren't given much time. Paradise Fire, we look at the time frame on that clock, not very much at all. Same with 2017, the Tubbs Fire. People are still blown away by how quickly that fire transitioned from what was a very rural environment into a suburban environment in the city of Santa Rosa. And then even this year, the way the fires were moving with such quickness that being able to get this type or having this luxury wasn't there. So looking at this, is there a way we can do this before the event? And that's really where we started, I think, making some progress in terms of getting to the plan or the application we have today. We knew a big component of the application was going to be communication. It always is, no matter what we're doing. And prior to this, we see a lot of different folks using different media to get the word out. One general message has to be decided on by a team or an agency, and then that same message has to be disseminated out to numerous agencies who then use different medias to get that out. And by the time it reached the community or the public, who actually needed to hear an alert or an evacuation order, it was either not the same as the original message, or it changed so much through translation, or by the time it got to them, the fire already moved through their area and the evacuation order wasn't really that good again. It wasn't really that valuable to them. So with that, we knew that we had to be able to not only plan for the evacuation, but get it to be able to communicate it out to the public very quickly. And that's what we have today. So building on what was already out there, we started, we definitely didn't want to try to reinvent the wheel. We would love to buy a pre-canned package off the shelf. But everywhere we looked, folks had some really good information. And FEMA and even the state had some really good stuff. And what you see, the highlighted or the bolded text from FEMA in terms of their recommendations on what we need to do for evacuations is pretty clear in terms of a framework. Set clear expectations, let them know where to go and where it's safe to go, get the word out quickly, make sure everything's up to date and your maps are easily presentable to the public, and then look to the private sector where we can for assistance, and specifically with ways in terms of traffic management for that. But no one actually had a true program or something that we could just buy and implement here. Much like a Code Red or an Everbridge, there was not the same for evacuations. Next slide. So we built on FEMA's guidelines, and then we wanted to make sure that we were going to build something that if in the future it would be expandable, we'd already want to have the foundation laid where it's going to be the same across the state. So we looked at California's terminology for evacuations, and we took that same language and made sure that Charlie and his team were incorporating that into whatever we came up with, so we don't reinvent the wheel again or use something that's specific to one county and we start siloing the same type of information over and over again. Next slide. So on the right, you see the old evacuation plans for the Cal Fire unit that covers our area. And like everybody knows, once you print something up, it pretty much becomes obsolete. But having the printed portion of that still provides value, so we don't depend on technology solely for everything we're doing. So it was a good learning lesson. A lot of good information went into those, and we really did not want to throw it away with the bathwater. So we had to figure out a way to capture that legacy information, that local knowledge, and be able to put it into something that's always updated and a lot more easily distributed to everybody who needs it. So starting in 2009, Chief Jonathan Cox, who Charlie mentioned earlier, is the deputy chief for this unit, San Mateo County Fire, started looking to figure out, is there anyone else doing this? Can we start putting together a team? Can we start moving forward? A couple other folks in the area, specifically out of Moraga and Orinda, Fire Chief Dave Winokur had made some really big initial strides in what he thought was a good solution to the evacuation platform, and had pointed us towards Charlie and his team on a way to actually bring in some folks to come up with the ability to build something. And the reason why we enjoyed the relationship with Charlie, and I say relationship, but as a client relationship, is for the first time, and we're surrounded by big tech. It's hard to find another area that's as much surrounded. But Charlie and his team were the first to actually say, we don't have a solution for you. We have the ability to hopefully create one with you, because we don't want to take what we have and try to force it down your problem. And that was a really big dynamic shift for us. We actually found someone that said, hey, we're here to listen and help you solve it and help you design with you, but we're not here to make our thing work for you. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but for us, it was a really big deal because they learned our problem, and they provided the skill sets to us that we could help leverage to do that. And so that's where we're at with them. So Kentucky's finally willing to listen. And then Chief Cox was able to convince his board that this was a big deal worth funding, and they took a moonshot. There was no company prior to the San Mateo County unit, and we convinced Charlie and his team to form a company, so it takes some county funding to do that. And then before you know it, in last year, we were thrown right into the mix and started using this platform right away. So where we're at today, the all-inclusive platform, and for us, what that means is the start of a real-time benefit or a valuable tool that we can use, hopefully not too often, but when we need to use it, we can use it and actually have it work and then actually translate it out to the public right away. So, I don't want to go too deep into the actual process for everything, but we brought everybody in, we meaning all the fire departments in the county, all of our law partners and OES partners, brought everybody in on the planning purpose. So we didn't lose that knowledge from the binders. We didn't lose the ability to have OES weigh in on their benefits. And we certainly didn't want to do anything without law, because evacuations in the state still are the responsibility of that discipline. And we're able to design in each city throughout the entire county what we thought were the best pre-planned evacuation zones. And those pre-planned evacuation zones are from where we built a living platform online that we brought in a ton of stuff to be able to make valuable, meaning information from threat direction, past incidents, populations, street network analyzation. And I'll let Charlie go into all the good partnerships with that, but we really have something that works. Everyone plays from the same sheet of music on the web, and it's easily translated out to the public through a site that these guys have put together for them. But we've used it in this county now 3 times in the past year, and the results back from it have just been overwhelming. And folks now really want to what we call know your zone. And I say to folks, the public has it as well. So Charlie, thank you for letting me talk. I appreciate it. I could talk all day on this stuff. I think what your team has helped us put together is great and valuable. And we're happy to answer any questions after you get done with your part.
All right, thanks, Matt. Hopefully you can stick around.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to walk you through the CZU Lightning Complex fire. Simply put, we got called on the 16th. There was some lightning that had hit in the hills in San Mateo County. We were planning on launching the application in 6 weeks for all of San Mateo County. And Chief Cox and Unit Chief Larkin from CZU called us and said, is there any way you can get this thing going now? So we turned it on. We had a couple little quick hiccups that we solved, and then boom, we went live. And so when we say live, I mean, this thing went fast. This is a quick video of the CZU complex fire, the first 36 days. The 18th is when the first news release went out for one zone in a warning. And then on the 18th, 5 releases went out, and we opened it up to the evacuation much more broadly. And the thing that we learned very quickly was that the evacuation expanded incredibly fast. So it took 5 days to go from one zone under a warning to over 134 zones across 3 counties being evacuated. So having a consistent platform, one place to go, one nomenclature, a single set of semantics, made it incredibly efficient and effective for operations to move over 70,000 people. The big learning for us was the evacuation was 5 days. The repopulation took months and is still going on today. Chief Larkin said that he felt that the Zonehaven made it an incredibly significant difference in evacuating the 70,000 people in an organized and safe manner. And so the communication, the public involvement, the media, everything was much more consistent. Here's some screenshots from in the tent. I had the privilege of embedding with CAL FIRE Incident Management Team 3 for both the glass fire and the CZU complex fire. This is CZU complex fire. You can see the same information is on the big sheets on the tables. Same information was used as the backdrop for many of the daily maps that were put out by the situation and operations teams. The tool was used on laptops and on tablets. Sheriff was they were even printing out the maps and using grease pencils to figure out how to communicate. Really high collaboration between sheriff and fire, so really between law and fire. And then during repopulation, the utilities and other stakeholders were able to use the same zones to communicate when an area was ready to be repopulated, whether the transmissions lines had been cleaned up, whether the zone had been re-energized. And in many cases, we ended up having to split a zone because half the zone had been burned and half hadn't, or half the zone had been re-energized and half hadn't. So in those cases, we needed to split the zones temporarily, and I can show you that. So here's an example of the application on a tablet. These are screenshots from the CZU complex fire. What you see highlighted here are the 11 zones that were going under a warning during the fire. This is when we peaked at 134 zones. These zones are in Santa Clara County. Everything above this yellow line, this is San Mateo County. Everything below this line is in Santa Cruz County. So one site, one application, one common operating picture, regardless of the jurisdiction. And what becomes very interesting on the communication side is Santa Cruz County uses code red for their for their communications. And Santa Clara and San Mateo use Everbridge. So in order to communicate out a consistent message, we needed to create an authoritative source that was, in a sense, below those communication mechanisms. So select the 11 zones, figure out what the population, vehicles, area, whose responsibility it is, build the alert, and then send out the news release. So the same information is in the news release, and there's a single link in the news release to one site for everyone to go to in order to get access to the most current evacuation information. So this is key, one site, not multiple sites. We saw in a few of the other fires where each agency, each jurisdiction, each GIS group wanted to display their own map. And so the public had a scatter shot of places to go in order to figure out where things were being evacuated. If you lived in one county and worked in another county, it was incredibly difficult to figure out where you were at. So that same information, these same zones are sitting in ways. So if you close a zone in the application, Waze gets notified automatically and they shut down the zone and put up a warning. So they'll redirect traffic around the zone. The same information then gets populated onto Twitter and Facebook through whatever accounts you want them to be sent to. Emails go out. These are usually internal only. So in San Mateo County, if any zone changes status, all the fire chiefs, all the police chiefs, OES managers, and a few other folks that have subscribed get this list of the zones that have changed and what they've changed from and to, who changed them, that kind of information. And then finally, partners like Intera are able to consume what we call our zone mapping service, the ZMS. This is a live feed that is the same thing that goes to the community site that can be consumed behind and used within the Intera application. And this works also for ArcGIS, AGOL. They can consume the data. The same information can be put into Tablet Command and many other tools as well. In fact, right now we are starting pilots with Intera in 2 counties in Oregon, where we will be more deeply embedding the 2 tools together. And then finally, that same information is made available on what we call Zonehaven Aware, which is the community site. You can go there today, community.zonehaven.com, and see the current status of zones, and I'll actually show you that. The community site is really set up to do a couple things, very simple. Enter your address and figure out what zone you're in. So you can access your predefined evacuation zones. The community can get access to preparation resources, so providing links and other information that might be critical for people to prepare for an evacuation. And then finally, to always be getting access to and know where to go for the latest updates. And we saw that this site was used a ton during the recent debris flow activities in San Mateo and Santa Cruz County, and during the CZU complex fire. Hundreds of thousands of people were hitting the site. The news channels were taking screenshots and putting them in their updates, et cetera. And so we're starting to work with many more of those groups in order to get that information fed to them. But I want to be clear, we're talking a lot about fire today, because wildfire in California is what's really driven this story. But evacuations are multi-hazard, right? The same information, the same learnings that we've had from the fires also work for active shooter, tsunami inundation, dam inundation, hazardous materials. It's earthquakes. We see earthquakes really as just a set of multiple hazards happening at the same time. But the same information and the same tools can be used regardless of whether or not you are in addition to the wildfire. So I'll walk you quickly through our regional approach. A key thing for us here is getting multiple agencies collaborating and working together and to think regionally, because evacuations, especially on these large incidents, cover large areas. Here's an example, one incident for each of these incidents. So here are the incidents that happened just in 2020 in Northern California. The number you see in the large number, that's just the number of counties that were involved in each of these fires. So imagine the August complex fire or the glass fire. There were 6 counties. How many OES departments, how many incident command teams, how many GIS groups, how many police and fire departments. So if every one of those groups is operating their own separate platform or not sharing a common operating picture specifically for evacuations, it gets incredibly complicated, both for the incident command teams and also for the public to understand what's happening. So we've taken a regional approach. Here you see 5 counties. By this fire season, these 5 counties should be up and running. We are currently in the process of onboarding Alameda County. They have approved all of their zones. Santa Cruz, San Mateo County, fully approved. Portions of Santa Clara County are approved, and portions of Contra Costa. But the rest of these should be coming on board fairly quickly. Then in the North Bay, we've got Sonoma, Marin, Lake County, and Napa County. The glass fire that we worked on was right at the triple junction of those 3. We supported that, and then following the glass fire, they all came on board as customers. And then in the foothills of the Sierra, so going really from kind of Sacramento and the valley where there's a lot of flooding, and then up into the foothills, we've got 3 counties here that are working individually and together in order to provide a regional context. And so the platform that I'm going to walk you through is really, there's 2 things to think about on this. One is it's zone-based, and we call these smart zones because we've got algorithms and people who've built over 6,000 zones across California, portions of Colorado, and Oregon, using all the information that Chief Sampson had mentioned. So running simulations on traffic, on fire, looking at historical fire, looking at historical weather, looking at a number of structures, acreage, demographics, all of that stuff, geography, where the railroads and rivers, all that stuff comes in to understand the evacuability of a zone. So, so we first create those, and we call those the preliminary zones. Then the tool is meant to be collaborative, and I'll show you that once we get into the tool. But the goal here is that we can plan together, that we can increase the intelligence for the mutual aid so that people, when they show up, have access to that hyper-local information without having to find some local to help them get that information. And then to learn from your peers and work with your peers. So how do we do trainings, drills, and other stuff that helps all of us learn together? So we have office hours on a weekly basis where we have people from multiple counties getting on the call, asking questions, and then even helping each other out. We may not be the one with the answer, but the sheriff from Yuba might have the right answer, or the fire chief from Fremont might have the answer. And then being able to share that information very easily. So we have a very prescriptive process for onboarding, and we've learned this through the many counties and agencies that we've worked with. So like I said, we start with preliminary zones, and then we work with agencies to build out what we call multi-agency teams. We really try to avoid having a non-multi-agency group work on the zones. So we want to have fire, we want to have law, and potentially also OES. Because if we have fire only, we're going to have that meeting again with law. If we have law only, we're going to have that meeting again with fire. And so getting the teams together is really what drives the most value for everyone. And so far, we haven't had any teams where they weren't willing to get together and work on this stuff together. Here's some images of the multi-agency teams working together. You can see, for example, Chief Sampson in this picture working with the South San Francisco Police Department, determining, did we draw the zone in the right area? Are we comfortable with that? Here's Redwood City, Chuck Lax and their team working on figuring out their zones as well. So this is something that we do on a very regular basis. We've got currently active 75 teams. San Mateo County, for example, has 11 teams organized by fire departments. We've got other teams in other areas that are organized more geographically. It really depends on the size of the county. We've got some counties with 50,000 people, and we've got counties with up to 2 million or more. So once the zones are approved, then it opens up the world. Right now we have these zones, we can build out the pre-plans, we can do the drills and the training, we can set up the different alert channels like the social media, who's gonna get the emails, how do we interact with your Everbridge, your Code Red, your Ad-Hoc system, and the whole community outreach program. So the pre-planning piece is really focused on these 2-page PDFs. If you make a change in the application, it automatically updates the PDF. So those printed out boxes of documents are great, but they get out of date. And so if we do a training or a real incident happens and we learn something, let's get that information into the pre-plan. And I'll go through these in a little more detail when we get into the app. Then there's the training piece, drills and training. Here's an example of a training that was run in Contra Costa and Alameda County together. And so this is a 1, 3, and 5 hour fire model. And so they did a training where, what do you do at 1 hour? What do you do at 3 hour? What do you do at 5 hour? Where do you evacuate? When do you evacuate? Who makes the decision? When do you call the community warning system? What are the ways that we communicate out? And where are we going to send people? And so one of the learnings from this actual training was that Golden Gate Fields down here was an area that the Contra Costa County folks thought would be a great place to send folks if there was an emergency or an evacuation. Turns out that's in Alameda County, and Alameda County didn't at the time have a plan or a relationship with Golden Gate Fields. It's private property. So following this training, Contra Costa and Alameda County started working with the property owner here to be able to turn this into a temporary evacuation point. So the trainings themselves, they help get everyone familiar with how to do an evacuation, but they also help drive mitigation and preparation for the overall evacuation infrastructure. The multi-channel notification. So how do we get out to the community site? What integrations are there? Are we going to integrate with Terra, Everbridge, Tablet Command, Code Red, you name it? Which social media channels? That's the other stuff that needs to be set up. And then finally, once you have the zones approved, you don't necessarily have to have the pre-plans, but bringing the community in and getting them engaged is mission critical. So we currently have Know Your Zone campaigns running for San Mateo County, Yuba County, City of Atascadero and San Luis Obispo County, and then both Alameda and Nevada County will be starting theirs fairly soon. You can see little things like a website people can go to. These are refrigerator magnets that can be given out. People are talking about doing these, find your zone while you're at a farmer's market and write it down and bring it home. This is a billboard that is in the near the airport in South San Francisco that Chief Sampson was able to get access to because of the public safety rules that allow them to be able to put some ads on the billboards. This is a billboard that's on the Highway 101 in Atascadero that links you to their story around getting to know your zone as well. So that's been a really big piece of this. So what I'm going to do right now is jump into the application itself. Let's see, how much time do we have? We've got a little bit of time left here. This is the actual app itself. You need to have permissions to get in here. If you are you have the rights to either be a viewer, an editor, an administrator, and/or an alerter. And those are the different roles that we have in the app. The first thing you would notice coming into the app is that you can see everybody else's information. You can't edit it necessarily unless they've given you permission to, but Matt Sampson can come in, he's from South San Francisco, but he can see what's going on in Alameda County, or up here in Sonoma, Napa, Lake County, or up in the foothills where we've got the Placer and Yuba counties currently coming on board. So this is our production site. So this is what is currently available for the customers to look at. We also have our beta site, and you can see there's more data in here because this is the stuff that's in process. And so there's a lot more information in the beta site right now. And that stuff will be migrating to the production site over time. So first thing I also see in here are there's some zones that have color. So these zones are actually under orders or advisories right now in San Mateo County. So the blue, what you see in blue are debris flow hazard zones. So if I click on one of these zones, it tells me that here the evacuation warnings were lifted. And these were from the debris flows. And then this is one zone, it's hard to believe, many, many months later, this is a zone that's still under an evacuation order due to CZU complex fire damage. This is the Big Basin loop. This is also the loop that I showed you in Waze, because Waze has that zone still shut down. If we come up to South San Francisco, okay, and this is Chief Sampson's area. I'll turn on the critical evacuation facilities. This is information that we get from local sources, so from you and your GIS teams, from state and federal sources, and also information that can be entered into the system itself. So if I click on an individual zone like this, you can see the population information, etc. And then you can see that pre-plan. So every zone has its pre-plan. So here's the 2-page pre-plan. Page 1 is the critical infrastructure and critical evacuation facility special considerations, like where the gates, is there any water that's stashed there, what information needs to be known. And then page 2 is really more for law enforcement. Here's a set of traffic control points, here are the routes, and here are the potential arrival points that would be where we'd be sending people. And that's all the information that's entered in here. So if I click on this, you can see that this is Terra Bay Recreation Center. It can hold 350 people. I can actually go in here and edit that information. I can also, I'm going to change this to, no, that's a Terra Bay Recreation Center. So critical evacuation facility. So that's not the arrival point. Let me zoom in here and click on the arrival point. Edit. So I can make this community visible. So there's a community site. So if Chief Sampson decides that this is a site that's we want to send people to, right now it's turned off. People can't see it in the community application. He can come in here and turn that on. The other key piece here is that as you're planning an evacuation, you may end up selecting more than one zone and starting to see how many people you are evacuating. So as we start adding more and more zones, we start adding up populations, area, structure counts, and jurisdictional responsibilities. One thing I'll show here is, let me turn these off. traffic control points, and intersection counts. So what we see here is these are high-level shortest path intersection counts. So if I do, let's just get down to maybe these two. If we were to evacuate these two zones, we'd have around 1,900, 2,000 cars hitting this intersection. If we end up adding additional zones to this, we start to really load down people getting onto this on-ramp. And so in the planning, it may be that we want to tell folks that are in these zones, even if it's a shortest path for you to get to Highway 101, we want to send you to 280. So this is some of that planning that can happen during an actual, event, or ideally pre-planning with the local community. All of this stuff is editable. So those edits, once made, will automatically update in the PDF. And then simply, I want to change this. I have alert status. I promise I won't do this, Matt, because we're live. I can change these to an evacuation order, put in the reason, and then press go, and it will now send the email to Matt. It'll start sending all the rest of the alerts, let Waze know, etc. So that's a very simple way to do that. The last piece I'll show on this page is under our train tab. We can do all of these are areas where we've done pre-planned trainings. I'm going to just do a new one here for the IAFC meeting. And we'll do a fire, but you can see flood, shooter, hazardous materials, etc. We have, once we get to the fire section, you can simulate a new fire, you can use an existing fire, or you can just run a radius. For time's sake, I'm going to quickly do just an existing fire. I'll click on this one here, gives you a little preview. I'll choose that fire. And then what it's going to do is run the 1 hour, 3 hour, and 5 hour perimeter model. And it's going to tell us which zones might need to be activated. So for that initial attack, right, there's really two ways to use the application. One is initial attack. I'm first on scene. Let me drop a match and see if this thing could get big, and do I want to deal with it? And then there's the instant command. We're now, we're into day 4, day 5, the team's set up, and we're doing daily evacuation planning. So here we can see at hour 1, we've got 2 zones and about 4,000 people that could be affected. At hour 3, we've got about 9,000 people because we just hit this small subdivision. But once we get to hour 5, we hit a really big subdivision. We're up to 35,000 people. I'm going to add this zone because we know these fire models aren't perfect, and I want to just make sure that that's clear. We're up to 44,000 people. So now we're going to do an evacuation order. We're going to determine who we send it to, what platforms we're going to send it to, and then we're going to hit go. I'm not going to do that. We don't want to go live on that. So the same thing, all of this information. So if I get back to prepare, this is the live map. Where's Santa Cruz? Down here. Okay, so this is the community site. So you can come in here to community.zonehaven.com, and you can actually see all that same information. Now, if we go into the application and we change the status of a zone, that zone status will change. If we go in and we change, for example, we can go in and add a link. We can change the reason. We can look at, so all of this information is managed by you in that application. So it's very easy to get, your battalion chiefs and your sergeants and your line personnel to actually work and enter some of that information into the system. And so let's see, so this is the same data, right, that we have in the application. I'll show you one other thing really quick. During an actual event, if for some reason, for example, we're going to do there's a fire that started here and we only want to let a small portion of this zone know, I can come in here and actually split the zone on my iPad, right? So I would come in here and say, I think that we only want to evacuate this portion of the zone. And I would say split, and it's going to recalculate the structure count in that zone, the acreage, all of that, that information. And then it's going to apply a number. It's going to add a letter to the actual zone. So this is 139A and 139B. We call these temporary subzones because the community knows their zone. So you don't want to just randomly start slicing things up. You want people to know that it's part and parcel of their core piece. So that's really the presentation. Happy to talk more about it. We would love to work with any of you because every place we go, we learn. We learn about multi-hazard. We learn about better and newer ways to communicate the information. We learn about features and function that should be added to the app. We learn about how to do drills better. And every time we learn, we bring that to the entire community. So thanks for your time today. And I'm happy to open it up for questions to Chief Sampson or myself.
Thank you, Charlie. That was a fascinating presentation. We do have a couple of questions from our members, and I'd like to call on Dave Zader. Dave Zader is a Wildland Fire Policy Committee member from the IAFC. He's recently retired from Fire Management Officer from the City of Boulder. Dave, do you mind asking your question, please?
Sorry, I was having trouble finding the unmute button there for a second.
That's why you're not.
Yeah, I was wondering if you have an ability to calculate using kind of the drain down time or how long does it take to evacuate a community, and can you pair that with the modeling to start setting your trigger points to make that a more automated process?
So love your thinking. Currently, the answer is we don't do that, but that's like everything you're talking about in terms of adding that smarts. That's the stuff that we're working towards. So right now, the main function is making sure we're getting common zones, common nomenclature, and the ability for people to trigger those and get the alerts out. And so it's at that point, it's mostly manual. Clearance time is the holy grail for most of these, for this type of application. But it's incredibly difficult to determine a clearance time because some people choose not to go, some people stay, some people bring one car, some people bring all their cars and their RV. So doing those determinations really have to become scenario based. So we actually have a research project right now with UC Berkeley, and we're also working with the UC Davis, or the UC San Diego Supercomputer Lab to do both fire modeling and traffic simulation analysis. And so we are working towards having a much more sophisticated simulation tool set for traffic. Right now, we're delivering on the fire modeling piece. We've upgraded that and we'll be launching a new, an upgraded version 2 of our fire modeling within the next 3 weeks. And then following that, we'll be doing a bunch of detailed research on the traffic. What's interesting is we're seeing a lot of RFPs starting to come out for that kind of analysis, and it tends to be ad hoc. Or not ad hoc, it tends to be kind of one-offs. You bring somebody in, you do an analysis. And so we really want to be able to provide a tool where you can just drop a tree and block a road and then determine how that would change the overall flow model. A lot of that's for scenarios up front, determining, do we have the right evacuation infrastructure? Should we change stop signs to be 2-way instead of 4-way? Should we add a light that, opens up a road? Should we put in the infrastructure to support contraflow traffic? That kind of thing. So we're doing a ton of thinking and research on how to make it simple. The tools are there, but there's only 1 or 2 people usually in a county or even a region that can use those tools effectively.
Charlie, integration is extremely important. Appreciate your stakeholder-driven approach and making sure that EMS, fire, police, emergency management, council governments are all brought together in the planning. I can see that the more time you put in the front, the better, the more successful you're going to be in the rear. Chief Brian Schaefer from Spokane is a IFC Wildland Committee member, and he has a question for you. Chief Schaefer.
Well, I echo Dan's comments. I think the integration and the more time and effort on integrating that data pieces like vulnerable populations or the populations that may have large animals that would increase the time. I think those are really important. And it seems like with your last response, you kind of answered my question that you're working on it. It's
Well, I mean, things like large animal and vulnerable populations, that stuff we can put in today. So people, you can know that and you can plan that, right? And we've had to for, there are arrival points, meaning, shelters. Shelters are not just for people. Where do you take your animals is also one of the pieces that can be put into the shelter. So that stuff is already, available and doable. The part that is not is running all of the traffic scenarios to determine, what if people didn't move their animals until 2 hours after they got the warning, or how long does it normally take for somebody to do that, and how do we put that into the system? The other thing around vulnerable populations is that's a very sticky subject because of HIPAA compliance and putting, and maintaining the database. We've had a lot of people say, hey, we have a database from Health and Human Services we can put in there, but it's not always up to date, right? Somebody passes away or they move, and the information does not get updated. So these are things where we've talked about, self-reporting or working with the CERT teams or with the fire safe communities, but there's not a really good answer yet for the very localized people. It's much easier for facilities like, here's a nursing home, here's a hospital, here are daycare centers, here are schools. But for the individual person who's on a ventilator in a house, that data set is really hard to maintain, and has some privacy things that we have to address.
Thank you.
So I want to call on Kern County, California, Lieutenant Chief Zach Wells. Zach is a Fire Scope member on the Emerging Information Technology Specialist Group, and he's also a sitting Tech Council member. Zach?
Hey, thanks, Chief. Charlie, I just had a quick question. Real interested in your product, but I'm curious as far as, does Zonehaven provide critical alerts directly to the citizens, or are you relying on your interoperability with your third-party connections to provide that? And it just goes to the point that today everyone has a phone and it's beeping and dinging and ringing, and a lot of us put it on silent. But how do we connect with our citizens in this time when we're all distracted to get that signal through?
Yeah, it's a perpetual question. So the language we use is that we're developing and we're participating in what we call the alert fabric. And so every thread in that fabric may be a different way that we can catch somebody. So for example, we're working with Airbnb on a pilot because many of you have Airbnb guests who are transient coming into your area. They're not signed up on your community warning system. They don't follow you on Twitter or Facebook. So can we get them an alert actually through the Airbnb app, right? So through the fabric, we've got to find alternative ways to do that. So Waze is one of those where maybe your phone's on silent, but you're on the road and you're going somewhere, and it's going to tell you to go around that zone because of that. So we right now, through the application, it's not us, it's you, can instantiate the alert to go directly to Facebook, directly to Twitter, and then have the news releases and such go out. We're really focused on using your current channels. So we integrate with Everbridge so that you can use those channels if you want to. In some cases, we found that those channels can be a little bit slower. There's for good reasons, checks and balances, but during an initial attack, you may want to have certain people that are allowed to kind of circumvent those. So it's really a local memorandum of understanding, standard operating procedures that you guys need to determine within each of your agencies. And so we have documents and tools and stuff to help make those decisions and to add people as needed.
Thank you, sir. Next, I want to call on retired fire chief from San Juan County, New Mexico, Craig Doherty. He's also a member of the IAFC Wildland Fire Policy Committee.
A great presentation, Charlie. Hey, I'm just curious you mentioned Waze quite a bit. Just curious on the other platforms out there that folks are using for their navigation, i.e. Google Maps, Apple Maps, Bing Maps, so on and so forth. By going through that Waze, does that automatically update those other platforms, or are you working on agreements with those organizations and utilizing their technologies as well?
Well, we wish there was one place you could go, but all these guys, they don't share. They're competing with each other. So we're in conversations with Google Maps. We're in conversations with Apple Maps. We have not had a conversation with Bing. It seems with Waze and with Google, you probably the largest the number, but we continue to use our Silicon Valley relationships here to work our way into a variety of those organizations. So we've made it very easy with our ZMS for them to be able to consume the service. And so Google has actually been testing that service for San Mateo County. And then we've upgraded how we do it with Waze now that we have the ZMS as well. So Apple, we've just found the right people to talk to, and we will just continue to weave that alert fabric, every day we can, through work with you guys and through the contacts that we've been able to develop.
Charlie, it's really interesting, your public interaction. Could you explain to us how this was measured, or did you measure this? Was it measured in hits or public feedback during the CZU complex?
Well, I mean, at a minimum, we had the number of people hitting the site. So, at our peak time for the CZU complex, and it was lower for the debris flow because that was a smaller area and didn't get quite as much media coverage. We had like 2,000 to 3,000 concurrent users hitting the site at certain times of the day, and we ended up with over 250,000 unique users actually coming to the site during those events. So, and then anecdotally, we saw people on Nextdoor and on Twitter and on Facebook commenting on the zones, like cheering on their zone. My grandma lives in zone 38. Can't wait for zone 38 to open. So people were emotionally connecting to the zones, and we're watching and tracking information based on the zones themselves. So we were hopeful that the zone concept would resonate with the community. And what we've seen is that in a lot of these events, the zones get generated on the fly, and the public has never seen them when they show up on the map. And so that really gave us the confidence that they want to know beforehand, and that it would be helpful for them to know that information beforehand.
Sir, next I want to call on Fire Chief Mark Novak from Vail, Colorado, who's also a member of the Wildland Fire Policy Committee.
Okay, well, thank you for the great presentation. The question gets back to kind of feedback loop. And so in our community, we've discussed having the functionality to be able to have law enforcement to use a collector type app to report, the 1200 block of this street is fully evacuated. Is there an opportunity or the ability to integrate that with this product?
100%. So once again, we are a relatively young company, so we have an optimistic roadmap. We want to have an embedded collector app because we saw this with the CZU complex debris flows in January. Just being able to download for a zone the list of addresses is incredibly valuable. And then next level is being able to actually click on the map and say, I did clear this house, I did check this house. So it's something that we are, it's on our roadmap. And we see as being, hugely valuable for not just law enforcement, but for all the volunteers that come in and help do some of that door knocking.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's all the questions that we had in chat at this time. So I'm going to ask the committee members if there's anybody that has any additional questions. Okay, not hearing any. Charlie and Chief Sampson, we want to thank you for your time. This has been a fantastic presentation. We look forward to hosting this on our website. As we were thinking about some of our stakeholders in law enforcement, emergency management, I'm going to send them links to this. And I think it's important as we're evaluating projects like this that we're doing is taking that very stakeholder-driven, community-based approach to it. What you've done during the CZU complex and for the pre-planning, the exercises is outstanding. Thank you for your leadership in this area. Before we end this meeting, I'm going to turn it over to
Hey,
Jeff.
this is ending.
You want to come back?
Yeah.
Chief Doolin, do you have anything additional from the
I
IC?
just want to thank our vendor Zonehaven for the great presentation today, and I want to also thank our Wildland Policy Group members for attending. I hope it was very valuable for you. One of the things that Chief Muncie is trying to do with all of our webinars is to invite other pertinent stakeholders within the IFC family to join the webinars with us so we can share the technology and information across a broader spectrum. I do want to remind everybody about FRI, the last week of July in Charlotte, North Carolina. Make your plans for the Tech Council members. We will be having our annual Tech Council meeting from 9 a.m. to about 4 p.m. on Tuesday of that week. So be sure to mark your calendars, get in early, and look forward to seeing everybody next month for our next one and for our hosted mixer hosted by Intera coming up on May 11th. And you should be getting something soon about that. So thank you very much, Rob. Chief Muncie, you can close this out.
Thank you very much for everybody that attended. It was really great having the Wildland Policy Group with us today. If there's anybody that's reviewing this presentation and would like to join the Technology Council, please go to our website. You can find that by Googling IAFC Tech Council. And at the very bottom of the page, you'll find a link to send us your information. Thank you again, Charlie and Matt, for your presentations. It was excellent.
All right. Pleasure.